Today's featured book is the utterly unsettling and often heart-wrenching Song by Brigit Pegeen Kelly. This came out in 1995. It was Kelly's second collection, and it's probably the oldest book I featured this month. It's also the first time that I featured a poet who is no longer living. Brigit Pegeen Kelly passed in 2016, and I do think it is so important to feature and promote living poets and living authors, but occasionally you stumble across a work with long-lasting impact and resonance. For me, this is one of those works, and I'm definitely not the only one. I'm going to read you the title poem of this collection, give you a little background, and then give you a prompt. This is Song. Listen. There was a goat's head hanging by ropes in a tree. All night it hung there and sang, and those who heard it felt a hurt in their hearts and thought they were hearing the song of a night bird. They sat up in their beds, and then they lay back down again. In the night wind, the goat's head swayed back and forth, and from far off it shone faintly, the way the moonlight shone on the train track miles away, beside which the goat's headless body lay. Some boys had hacked its head off. It was harder work than they had imagined. The goat cried like a man and struggled hard, but they finished the job. They hung the bleeding head by the school and then ran off into the darkness that seems to hide everything. The head hung in the tree. The body lay by the tracks. The head called to the body to the head. They missed each other. The missing grew large between them, until it pulled the heart right out of the body, until the drawn heart flew toward the head, flew as a bird flies back to its cage, in the familiar perch from which it trills. Then the heart sang in the head, softly at first, and then louder, sang long and low until the morning light came up over the school and over the tree, and then the singing stopped. The goat had belonged to a small girl. She named the goat Broken Thorn Sweet Blackberry, named it after the night's bush of stars, because the goat's silky hair was dark as well water, because it had eyes like wild fruit. The girl lived near a high railroad track. At night she heard the trains passing, the sweet sound of the train's horn pouring softly over her bed, and each morning she woke to give the bleeding goat his pail of warm milk. She sang him songs about girls with ropes and cooks and boats. She brushed him with a stiff brush. She dreamed daily that he grew bigger, and he did. She thought her dreaming made it so. But one night the girl didn't hear the train's horn, and the next morning she woke to an empty yard. The goat was gone. Everything looked strange. It was as if a storm had passed through while she slept. Wind and stones, rain stripping the branches of fruit. She knew that someone had stolen the goat and that he had come to harm. She called to him. All morning and into the afternoon she called and called. She walked and walked. In her chest a bad feeling, like the feeling of the stones gouging the soft undersides of her bare feet. Then somebody found the goat's body by the high tracks, the flies already filling their soft bottles at the goat's torn neck. Then somebody found the head hanging in a tree by the school. They hurried to take these things away so that the girl would not see them. They hurried to raise money to buy the girl another goat. They hurried to find the boys who had done this, to hear them say it was a joke. It was nothing but a joke. But listen, here is the point. The boys thought to have their fun and be done with it. It was harder work than they had imagined, this silly sacrifice. But they finished the job, whistling as they washed their large hands in the dark. What they didn't know was that the goat's head was already singing behind them in the tree. What they didn't know was that the goat's head would go on singing just for them, long after the ropes were down, and that they would learn to listen. Pail after pail, stroke after patient stroke. They would wake in the night thinking they heard the wind in the trees or a night bird, with their hearts beating harder. There would be a whistle, a hum, a high murmur, and at last a song. The low song a lost boy sings, remembering his mother's call. Not a cruel song, no, not cruel at all. This song is sweet. It is sweet. The heart dies of this sweetness. In preparation for this video, I knew I wanted to feature the poem Song, But I wanted first to hear what other people had to say about the poem and whether anyone was still talking about it in 2023. I came across a podcast interview from 2021 featuring the poet Gabrielle Bates, who just recently released her debut collection Judas Goat through Tin House Books. Haven't read it yet, so I can't share opinions, but I do love Tin House. I worked for them in the past, and I think Gabby is definitely someone to watch. I stumbled into her reading last month in Seattle at AWP, and it was quite good, so I look forward to reading her work. But back in 2021, she was on a podcast, and she discussed this book at length. And at the time, she said, "I think that the title poem song is such an incredible example of how a poet can build an entire world out of a single word, out of a single word's history." For this poem, I think about the word tragedy, which comes from the Greek tragos for goat and odi for song. Quite literally, goat song is the word tragedy. I feel like this poem can be read as a world conjured out of that one word, which blows my mind. I didn't know that that was the basis of the poem until I stumbled across this, and I completely relate to how Gabby feels because I'm also completely mind blown. In week 1, we looked at a few etymologies, and if you haven't already guessed it, we're going to be doing that again today. Today's prompt is to research etymologies for your favorite words and pick one that's comprised of words that mean other things. Use both the original word and the words that comprise it as inspiration for a poem. So, for example, Brigit Pegeen Kelly took tragedy, comprised of goat and song, and wrote a tragic poem that features basically a goat song. I don't always do the prompts I share, but I think I'll do this one. It sounds fun. That's it for me today. Thanks so much for joining me. Drop your questions and comments below if you have them, and I will see you tomorrow.